to Zaria that is against art, or that is against objects that cast shadows. And there were several other issues that were raised. But what happened in Zaria? In 1959, 58, the Zaria Art Society was formed by the students who went to study there. Interestingly, apart from Adamu, they came from Kano. It's not called Kano, it's Kano. It's the proper pronunciation. K-A-N-O is Kano. It's not Kano. It's Kaduna, not Kaduna. So it's good to learn to pronounce these things properly. And I think that my friend here will understand what I mean. And that's the challenge that most of us have. And we don't apologize for calling people's names wrongly. I remember Buhari could never properly call the name of BP for the shame. But these are some of the challenges that Northern Nigeria brings to bear. We talk about the perception, the stereotyping of the perceptions of Northern Nigeria. And anyway, perception is a double-edged sword, isn't it? If you look at the simple definition of perception, it has to do with informed knowledge, wisdom, somebody that has a capacity to analyze, to make good judgment. But we are actually more interested in negative perception, which is that you have built your own ideas about something or somebody, and that's what you prefer to work in. And I think that the challenges of governance, or our leaders, we prefer to call them rulers, is to help us navigate through these very difficult areas, which are not really very difficult. So that is one. I come from Northern Nigeria, for example, and I had a show at the Photo Institute. And the guy that was responsible to organize the show for me made sure I didn't have a catalog. He kept saying that the catalog would come. Can you imagine Photo Institute 1999? Jess was there. Did you see a catalog? That was one of the first time of meeting Jess. I went to the toilet and went. How could you have an exhibition without a catalog? Later on, years after, I was told that I just deal with the directors and I don't deal with it. So I felt that there was a certain level of antagonism against somebody from Zaria. But I didn't submit myself. I treated it as a personal disadvantage or challenge. I didn't look at it as north-south. But truly speaking, if somebody were to analyze it, you cannot, run away from looking at that kind of attitude of perception. So, for example, if the guy was from Benin, or from Suka, or from Yaba or Lagos, would you have a show like that without a catalog? It's not possible. So these are the realities of the perception. And I'm using myself as an example. I don't want to talk about things. I'm talking about an experiential, encounter. I can go on and on, but to think that Renate, who was once the most powerful, cultural, directors of the foreign institute, is a personal friend, and actually helped me to attend a document 9 in Casa. So the thing is, it looks like we have to agree that even when it comes to art consumption, art presentation, it is ethnicized. I've been practicing art for the past 50 years now. All right, and we must agree that there is politics in art. It's not new, it's not different, don't get me wrong. But there's a need for us to begin to see how, like the curator Aisha has said, the kind of ideas the crazy ideas that Justice is advancing about this place not talking about art. So art becomes like a tool. So art is a hammer that can be used for different things. And it's okay. So it's okay, but truly that's wonderful. I think it's a very wonderful perspective. That he is trying to dematerialize art and to cause you to see art as an idea beyond object. Art as idea beyond art as object. I think I will stop here for now. I have a lot to say. But to say that I have generated a list of readings that if you don't mind, we can print it. And for those of you who are interested in reading about art, I've had about a couple of books that I've given. Those of you that want to write on art, because there's lots of deficiency in the way in which you write on art. And I have to find a few books from my library that I can share with you. Thank God you can find them on the net. I don't have a book to give you.
Thank you very much for your responses, Prof. And just going off of what Prof has said about misrepresentations of Northerners, the stereotyping, and which of course leads to tangible disadvantages, right? Because what is not seen and what is not examined properly will not be studied. People will not be curious about it, which is again another thing that the museum saw and decided that this exhibition was important to hold. Kadaria, you are someone that has worked in the media space for so long. You're a northern woman that has really led the charge. So how do you think media coverage and programming can be designed to be more inclusive and representative of northern Nigerian art and artists?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aisha. I work closely. First off, let me say congratulations. I'm really happy to be here because it is unusual to actually see a space dedicated to exploring the arts as it pertains to the North, whether it is based on the way where people created it come from, or whether it is telling the story of that place. So I'm really, really pleased to be here. Look, the lack of representation is quite nuanced. It is true that sometimes it's about biases and about the fact that people focus on the things that reinforce their biases. But sometimes it is simply that you're not at the table. It is that simple. People are people, and people will focus on the things that pertain them, that they care about. And so if you are not at a place as Northerners when conversations are happening, when decisions are being taken regarding the arts or media, all that sort of thing, then it comes across as well as some sort of erasure. You're not represented. So there's a conversation to be had about biases and about ensuring that spaces that are meant to be inclusive do become inclusive. But there's also a conversation to be had about us putting our thoughts forward, which is why I'm really pleased to see you take this on, right? It's never going to be other people telling our stories. It never works that way, or however you dice it. If you take this conversation outside the arts, for example, and try and situate it within, say, the context of the global North and the global South, and think in terms of how the South, the art of the global South, is represented, and the reason why suddenly our arts, and I talk about the arts generally, so I'm talking about music, visual arts, all of that. If you think in terms of how our music, for example, is doing internationally now, it is only when we embraced it and began to make it part of who we are that it then started gaining global attention. When we were busy trying to sing with American accents and trying to do R&B and music that is foreign to us, we did okay, but we didn't dominate the world. So the point that I'm making is that there is a personal responsibility that we need to take when it comes to exploring who we are, what we are. Because you see, at the end of the day, I believe the arts is where our humanity resides, right? It is what allows us to explore the quantum of who we are as people, as sentient beings who are thinking. And when I say the quantum of who we are, I mean everything. Our pain, our joy, our happiness, everything that we are. Even an aspirant, right? So therefore, if that's the case, I think the case has to be made for us to begin to think of art as essential. Traditionally, and this will be my last point, museums are Western. You know, if you look at the way our art has developed, it has developed on our walls, the way we decorate our walls, how we decorate our bodies, the songs that we sing, the way that we dance. The idea of finding a space where you then put art that people come and look at is very much a Western creation. So, but we are in a modern world, and I genuinely think there's space for museums and all of that. But I also think part of our task is to collaborate with those museums so that we begin to take art back to the people, back to the streets, so that people can actually own them. At the moment, museums are very rarefied spaces, you know. It's educated people who go there. It's people with a bit of money who go there. It changes the relationship between us and art, because art becomes something that we look at, that we examine, that we consume, rather than something we live, which is how we used to do our art traditionally as Africans, right? So the point I'm making is that I think that there needs to be a little bit more creativity in the way we work with the arts, particularly among our people. But definitely, the diversity of the North is something that people are only beginning to discover. And I think the arts are one way in which people can actually be made to understand that we are a complex, complicated people, and we're not this one-dimensional group that everybody likes to think of us as. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My next question actually for you then, Soki. I detailed that of Professor Buhari's response while talking about art rights and art criticism. Nobody listens, you know, a section of art that is very important, but that has also been subject, not just in Nigeria, but all around the world. In Nigeria in particular, it is an ministry of idea. And how can we go beyond reportage and just general coverage of the past, actual art criticism and art writing, and what are some of the problems that art writers are facing, and how can we assist them, you know, to be able to engage more critically, more holistic, in a more nuanced, more balanced way, not just art from Northern Nigeria, but art from Nigeria as a whole.
Okay. That's a very important question. Very important question. Because you have to look at the realities, expectations, suppose there will be realities. We are talking when you talk about the media. What is more common? Just the electronic and the print media. That's what we are. I'm sure that's what you're referring to. Not the social media. What you may call the traditional media. Because right now, the social media, people are taking matters into their hands. But in this traditional media, there are realities. Let me be more specific, especially with the print media, where they have to struggle to survive. And of course, they have their preferences, politics, business. They get the higher percentage. In some pages, the art pages are dropped. And again, you also look at the working environment, which may be unsuitable. And then it makes the art writing or the art section less attractive and less creative. I'll come to that I'll come to the specifics of that. Because I just said less creative. You may wonder what I mean by that. But let me just give my experience when I first walked into, not exactly as a newbie in the industry, media industry. I previously worked in advertising in the early 90s. Soon after I finished my master's degree, I didn't want to be associated with journalism. I thought journalists were looking very, so I wanted a glamour world. So I went in, I started with Ogi, the person that met them as a copywriter. But after 2 years, the numbing predictability of everything was getting to me. I had to resign. I resigned actually going nowhere. And I experienced life without a job for a while and then realized that I committed career suicide, which was not the right thing to do. Then a brief interaction, not brief actually, some years, but really years of hard knocks, learning from the streets. I found myself working in shipping as a marketing executive. Then before joining the Comet, I had to give this background to tell you that I came in as a late bloomer into journalism. So coming in there, okay, I had a language skill, international language, that I could speak just French, a good high level of proficiency, almost as good as my English. My German was not yet at that level as it is now. But then I got into the department, and there was this lady, this American lady, Mrs. Lawrence, who came with them from the garden. After standing around for long, the first thing she said to me was art. I was flustered because I was expecting maybe the foreign desk. I have nothing against the arts actually. So she wanted to maybe cancel it, but she thought I was protesting. Somebody said no, he was confused. So I got to I didn't know what was going on. But of course, reporting art was not a problem to me. I have once written articles to get reported an event back in '87. That was when I just, I think I finished my NYC '86. So I reported an event for the French Cultural Center, a musical group that came to perform at the TV station for a local newspaper. Actually, I didn't know it was the French Center there that took this article there. So on getting there, telling me art, I joined the desk just for people. Yes, back then, when there were other desks filling with reporters, we had just 4. The art editor, the deputy, and then I and one other person. And I noticed the challenge they had. And then one day we came back from an outing. I noticed they were whispering to themselves. Let's push to me. I said, push what to me? When I thought visual arts. Because I thought that's not a problem. I said, sure. That's how I started covering visual arts. Because then I learned this, I had a secret from one of them. That's actually how they did getting back. Or they go for an art exhibition. That is the person was the art editor. He said all he was doing, they will be reporting how people interacted. Somebody missed a car, then they run after the car. And those things will make up a story and you feel and so that's one challenge. I mean, we missed that hitting the nail on the head and just giving you one challenge. That is first of all understanding the appreciation of what you're going to do right about. Then there was another case. This didn't happen in the garden. This didn't happen in the comment. It happened in the garden. A colleague who is now, I think he's ex. I'm not sure he's still in garden, but I'm sure some of my colleagues here may know who I'm talking about. He was sent to cover a classical music concert. He sat through the concert to the end. He got back and met somebody. I'm sure you all know German. German was the editor. I asked him, so where is that report? He said, well, he said Yoruba. They were asked, play music. Now, you see part of the problem. That's first the if it's politics, business he went to cover, there would have been someone that made speeches and all of that. He was ill-prepared for that desk. And that desk was just pushed to that desk, probably. Well, just no induction. That is one challenge. Then I spoke about, I said something I'll return for later, which is how the creative the desk will be. The business desk, especially banking sector, the corporate sector generally. They are always interested in what is written. Many times, some of them we actually buy the papers to read. And then politics, same thing. Apart from what they are being written about. But when it comes to the arts, I've asked a forum in Abuja, I don't know if you are there, Abuja Open House. I said, how many people among the artists, how many of you buy newspapers just to read the arts places? I doubt somebody raised his hand, but it was just to me. I don't think a 3 years ago I started. And that person was an artist, not just an artist, he worked with a newspaper that is now defunct. He raised his hand, and then, of course, he later made a comment to counter my comment. That's an opinion. I have no issue with that. But the fact is that I didn't address the main thing. How many artists buy newspapers just to read, to make the app, to at least to create traffic to the app pages? Of course, you can blame the writers for going beyond. You said something about going beyond reporting. Of course, that's when they'll be challenged. Who are they talking to? That's the problem. Somebody can actually engage works, do the best writing, but again, there is very few readers. I also have, or maybe there are people who are reading and you will never know. Not everybody has the discipline of saying, well, able to perform it to a single audience. Or I can imagine if in this room there were only 2 people listening to us, how motivated are people who are sitting here? How motivated would they be? So look at that as a challenge. Very serious one, because that affects the others. Yes, and then the employers also are business people. I was in there with a billionaire who was boasting that he was capable of getting all the back MDs to his living room to start a newspaper. I just scoffed. I laughed because I told him that look, this newspaper thing, you think we could start it? He said, look, we could get one. I wanted to tell you, look, I knew people like you now who had the champion. Why is champion today? Newspaper industry is the type that put pour in all your money. The next 5 years, you may not even get your profit. So right now there is less sentiment, and now that's what it takes us to agenda setting. That sets the kind of agenda, and also the kind of things we suffer when the last speaker here spoke about the global north and the global south, when they prioritize news from the global north at the expense of ours, and then only focus on the negative side. For instance, what makes news here is a disaster happens there. But when something, maybe a kind of development, that they can talk about the global north, and that's what the people want to hear, and that's the news. There are wars going on. The Somali war, I'm not sure at what time it went down. But then when Ukraine came up, that was everything else was shifted to we just went to the background. People were still dying in those places, but that was not important. Congo is still experiencing turbulence. That's no longer the front page. That's no longer the front page. So, and also, again, that is how the sinking and surging and the wave, just like a wave, the wave by the seaside. That's how it happens in the media. It goes up and down, and then something comes, and then it's like an agenda is set. So back to the north-south, like Dr. talked about now. The fact is, he has already, Prof has already talked about the structure, perception, and all that. And it's true. And literally, if you look at it, there was a time people had all over the nation, people are talking about the impact of legal sciences for the press. Let's people forget that you have papers in the north. I mean, we also had in Nigeria. I don't want to start talking about the recent ones. You have New Nigeria, you have other state papers that are stronger than the Democrats. Yeah. But then everybody was talking about the impact of Lagos taxes. Because that is where, and then these are the people that will set agenda. So if you want to be heard and seen nationally, you just have to come to the Lagos about axis papers that operate within that agenda. So this thing has become a tradition, but again, somehow gradually I think we are winning ourselves away from it. I think maybe thanks to the social media to a certain extent, and the fact that a lot of papers are gone online. And again, the younger people are becoming more interactive with the wider world. So I think not to take much of the time, please.
Okay. I'm just going to ask you one more quick question, and it's a yes or no. You've mentioned a lot of the challenges like facing arts coverage and contributing. Do you think that we need to break out of the arts desk and move on to being a general case? Do you think it's time for art writers to reject the art desk and write about art as they write about anything? As they write about anything else. So to
yes, I believe that in journalism. Sorry, I believe in journalism. That's I went to held a workshop in the Good Institutes. Some I think a professor trained and he had a workshop on art writing. And there was also another one they held with Chica. Yeah, Chica, okay, and then another one held by Frank Bello. First of all, those are art historians. They are not art journalists. So they cannot, because there is a lot for an art journalist to benefit. A lot, especially when it comes to appreciation, a lot of things. But that is not in terms of style of presentation. I guess I'm not journalist, primarily a journalist. Even if he does criticism at any stage, he's primarily a journalist. So he must learn to communicate with the wider audience. He's not writing for an art journal. I agree that it's a segment of the society that reads the arts section. May not be everybody, but at the same time, there could be new converts to that. And even when an artist is written about and he starts to circulate what is written about him, he expects his friend to read it. And if his friend cannot relate to what is written, they will not be able to read it, understand. So,
okay. And thank you very much for your response. So, yeah, this next question is again, going back to Professor Buhari's response, where he spoke about the adaptation of country, and it's a signal of cultural sensitivity when voting. And that is something that lasts a lot of coverage about. But again, when we move beyond to other parts of it, how do you think that media practitioners can input cultural sensitivity in ensuring this balance, a more robust reportage of what is happening?
I think it begins first with self-knowledge. It sounds like a funny answer, but that's where it starts. What is the problem with reporting? It's that oftentimes there is certain cognitive bias. And many times it's, you could say, unintentional. It's a reflection of what we have or what we have been exposed to. And many times we are transmitting this without being aware of it. For instance, I saw the other day, well, a while back, there was this tweet on social media about the singer, which the female singer, in which the fellow said, this female singer is so good that now she can compete only with men. You get the point. Okay, what is this? This is now it's a very strong gender bias. There's this subconscious perception that women are inferior to men. And I think that this is to a large extent what happens. That when we write, we transmit things that we have go to that way we have. That's why I said we use self-knowledge. It's not so much that we will ever be free from bias. We will never be free from bias. We will always have, but it's now to move from the unconscious to the conscious, such that when we write, we are aware that yes, I tend in this direction, so I need to now review carefully what I write so as not to portray certain perceptions or rather impressions. Because the way we write, being well, okay, one of my strong points is grammar as an English major. But sometimes the very structure of the sentence transmits certain messages. Okay, when we say, for instance, that I saw this example the other day, say, for instance, that girls are as good at football as men. We're making a comparison. Why should we be making such a comparison? That kind of structure. Okay. So really, I think that is one of the things that people as a way of dealing with this is that self-knowledge to be able to say, well, these are the biases that you should watch out for. And so that when I write, I am not framing things. I am not using terms which are stereotypical, or at least I am a bit more sensitive to the meanings of some of the terms. So self-knowledge, I would say.
Thank you for the response. Also, just of Kadaria's response, and sorry, Professor, this question is for you. Off of our response, and also Dr. Obiaya's idea of self-knowledge. Kadaria spoke a little bit about the purpose of art, in the past, and turning to that sort of tradition where we're surrounded by art and creation. In this exhibition, there's an interplay between the artisanal crafts and the works of fine artists. And that's an interesting dichotomy. How do you think that now fine artists can use their work to sort of protect these artisanal crafts that are suffering, as a result of changing times? And we do not need those utensils as much. Nobody needs an aluminium kettle, for example, when everybody is going back to electric kettles. So even though we don't need them, it's still important to protect these cultures, these sorts of natural interaction. So how do you think art can be used to preserve these cultures?
So let me start with a very outlandish statement. Who needs art? I mean, to hell with it. Yeah, because really, like he said, there's been every human animal is driven by an agenda. And but coming back to it, because we are supposed to be, depending on what role you want to teach yourself. If we say that as, let's use the popular word, stakeholders of culture, we think that we have a responsibility to preserve our culture. And to preserve our culture again is problematic because if we say that culture is dynamic, so why do you want to preserve something that is growing, is vanishing? These are some of the push and pull thinking. We see this where the role of institutions, can have very powerful roles to play. Okay, the Emirs Palace, the Oba's Palace, these are custodians of tradition, and they should be empowered, they should be funded, they should be assisted to preserve the finest treasures, cultural treasures of their communities. Not for their own sake, but for the sake of Nigeria as a country. So if a spoon, a wooden spoon that we have before the metal or gold spoon, call it koshia. If it's never used in the northern anymore, wooden spoons. But we can keep them as memorials. And that's where the museum comes in. So again, it goes to the issue raised by Sister Kadaria. The impoverishment, deliberate impoverishment of the rural areas has reduced humanity to survival. And even though art has to do with the issues of transcendental values, you have that tension that is being created by the leadership of Africa or the country. I try to explain this to some of my students. The origin of politics and power is that three people want to cook three different places, and they have three different things they want to eat. So among the three people, they decide that Aisha is a lady of integrity. Let's give her the responsibility to decide who cooks first. That's how government evolved. That we have many different interests. So Aisha decided, okay, you are not hungry, you want to eat beans. It takes a long time to cook beans. So the person who wants to eat rice should be given the pot to cook first. That's very common, structure. That's how government evolved. And then, of course, you know what we have today in modern leadership of government. It's not people who are interested in common interest. But here is it. I made some of my examples. The difference between craft as a teacher of art and fine art is constructed for different areas. I know of artists who are so-called contemporary modern artists whose works are at best craft. They have found a certain way of creating artworks. I won't tell you who they are, because they just have warned us that art is not to be, should use it to stimulate, to provoke thinking. There are certain artists who have found a fantastic way of creating their work. I call that art and craft. And they are making money out of it better than those who are eclectic, who are dangling from one place to the other, they don't know what to do. But so I would not draw a very strict line between craft and art. Yemisi Shyllon Museum. But if I give a lecture in the library, in the university lecture theatre, I would draw the line for the students. Again, here, so the idea is to empower the students to see the shifting definitions, the shifting narratives about every idea in given project. That the cattle that is there, if you think of somebody like Jeff Koons and some of these great guys who do very polished things, if you take a walk that pot to the Metropolitan Museum and hang it in the night where nobody was there, I can assure you that would go for $20,000, and people will be contesting for it. So the whole thing is like, all arts are agendas, all arts are products. And we're going to talk about curators. There are some curators who have used art just as a tool to make themselves an artist. Okay, there are some curators who are actually art. When they curate, by the time if there's time to go into mega art exhibitions, you see that some curators use art just as a tool to become the artist or to become the art.
Thank you, Professor Buhari. My question is for Kadaria. I know she has to leave soon, so I will ask you this last question. Professor Buhari mentioned shifting narratives, and said all arts are agendas. With your work in Zaria, India, and also RadioNow 95.3, you have very often represented Northern Nigeria and helped to create that balance in the narrative that is coming out of and about Northern Nigeria. How can you encourage the practitioners that we have here to go into exploring that field and to ensure that in their reportage they create the balance and build a balanced, holistic, robust image of Nigeria, not a one-sided? Thank you. Thank you. Hello?
just thought that's what thing is working. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Actually, before I answer that question, please let me just respond very quickly to the very profound question raised by Prof. He said who needs art. I think to answer that question, perhaps we have to delve into where do the art come from. I believe the art, like you said, comes against it. I'm a very spiritual person. I think creativity comes from God. And I think when people say to you, we are made in the image of God, that biblical quotation, I don't think, the spiritual masters were referring to our physical bodies. I think their reference was to the fact that God is a creator, and he put some of that power of creation inside us. And so when you speak to artists, they go into something called flow when they are creating. If you've done anything that is completely immersive, including writing, even when you're making films, there are times you disappear into the work you're doing and you're creating, and sometimes you come out of what seems to be almost like a trance. And you look at what you've created and you're wondering, how did that happen? Right? So the point I am making is that art is bigger than everything we think it is. Art has been put to allow us to express innately who we are, right? Both in terms of beauty, in terms of sorrow, in terms of joy. That's why music can be transforming when you're going through a heartbreak. The girls here understand what I mean. Somebody somewhere has written something and it seems to speak to everything that has ever happened to you. Because in reality, the human experience is the same, right? Over the thousands of years, right? It's just different iterations of the same thing. So for me, the reason why I pursue the arts the way that I do, that I combine arts, that I encourage people to go into the arts, because I think it speaks to something that is really human about it. And for that reason, we all need art. So you ask the question, who needs art? I think we all need it, right? Now, on the issue of how do I encourage people, I think diversity is an amazing thing. And if you are someone who has experienced it, you will understand that it enriches your life, right? I use a very basic example. Imagine if you never knew what amala tasted like, or a busi, or a jikariko, and you have to eat rice and beans every day. I think your palate is poorer because you don't have the experience of all sorts of other cuisines. So a life of diversity is actually a life of richness. It's a life of full living, where you basically understand that, oh my God, these things are different, but they're also, amazing. And I think you become a better rounded human being when you have diversity. So for that reason, I think writers need to sort of expand their minds and understand that when they report on things that they are not either familiar with or comfortable with, in addition to enriching their readers, their viewers, their whatever, they're also actually enriching their own lives. So there's a personal benefit to actually reporting diversity that goes beyond just your work. Diversity opens your mind. Diversity makes you tolerant. Diversity means you can go anywhere, be comfortable, and be home. I came to live in Lagos 16 years ago. I'd never lived down south. I married a Yoruba man. We met in London, and he woke up one day and decided he's relocating back to Nigeria. And I found myself in a city where I didn't know anybody, where I didn't understand the language, where I had no friends, I had no family. He's back in London, I'm still here. I'm not joking. He's taking his kids and they move back, and I visit, right? But I'm still here. And it's because Lagos, for me, represents that diversity that I think is critical for every person to experience. Lagos is home. Lagos is sanctuary. Lagos is freedom. Lagos is possibilities. And what makes all of that is because Lagos is diverse. And so there's a way in which if we could encourage diversity, even within the north. If you remember the old jobs, the old Kaduna, these were the most thriving part of the country. And part of the reason was because diversity was accepted and celebrated. And so I think we might be talking to outsiders about representing the North better. What have we done to represent ourselves within ourselves? Our divisions are deep and they are very costly and have been very costly. So there's also a way in which I think art can be used to heal amongst ourselves and can be used to sort of enable us to understand each other, tell each other stories, and bring back harmony. I hope that is enough.
Fantastic response, thank you. So my last question is going to be for Dr. Obiaya, actually. We're running out of time. Doctor, you teach young students mostly. How do you encourage your students to pursue stories outside of themselves and their immediate environment, even in the way they study? I remember in JS2, when I was about 11 years old, I did a project about Ireland, and I had a soft spot for Ireland ever since then. So how do you encourage, your students to, maybe even in their schoolwork, to study other representations of Nigeria? And this goes beyond just Northern Nigeria. There's so many other underrepresented parts, underrepresented cultures, underrepresented contemporary ideas that are going on in Nigeria and in Africa.
Well, one of the things, I wouldn't say it's me in particular, but rather it's the vision of the university, what we do here. One of our objectives in our data strategic plan is that 40% of our learning has to be experiential learning. So it's one of the ways that we can say that we encourage our students to be more diverse, to get to know more, because it's hands-on. So they really go out there and get involved. For instance, in the School of Media and Communication, much of what we do is considered with the media. And you see that these young people then are the ones making films, they are the ones doing shows to go on radio and whatever, they're practicing really and really carrying out a bit of research. I don't know if any of you happen to stumble across it, but in the last week or so, we had there in social media some of the students talking about their research. But these are the kinds of things that, yes, we get them to receive that exposure through the actual work they're doing. But one great thing that we have here, which also I think will respond to a point raised by Kadaria earlier, is the role of our museum. As I'm sure Jess proudly has already said, this is a teaching museum. So it's one of the ways in which our students also get that exposure to come here and see all of this. It's not from one part. To ask questions. What is this about? Where has it come from? Why is it like this? Why is it here? So on and so forth. So this kind of exposure that we give to our students, this museum plays a key role in that. So likely I would say it's that principle in experiential learning is not just a question of being in the classroom. We encourage our students to interact with industry. We encourage them to go out there to get that experience, internships, and then also the kind of work that they do within the space is also very much focused on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to take.
Can I say something about just one last thing? You see, there's a problem about regionalism, the discourse of Nigeria as a country that desires to build nationhood. The more we, of course, I'm not saying it's not important. You have to start somewhere, but I look forward to a time when we'll never talk about Ohanese or Oduduwa or AREWA, because these are constructs of political machinations that we use such a strong spiritual word, and they are designed to perpetuate certain kingdoms, personally constructed kingdoms that are meant to negotiate power and resources for a very specific and small so-called elite group. I lived all my life in the North, had the privilege to travel around. I speak about 7 Nigerian languages. There's hardly any part of this country I've not been to. But I find the North the most hypocritical country in the world. I call the North a country. It's so hypocritical. I mean, somebody rejects something, you meet him in the streets of London, you will never know he's the same guy you met in Kenya. So this is the problem. You come to Lagos, any guys in Lagos, I travel, when I used to travel by road, there was a lady wearing complete hijab. We're coming to Lagos. By the time we got to Lokoja, we went to eat. She had changed. She's removed the hijab. I said, Haja, why are you don't disturb me, don't disturb people. Shouldn't I relax? And her jeans was tight, fantastic. So why were you dressed like this? So you see, again, unless we begin to have leaders who can de-emphasize regionalism, ethnicity, religion, and really get into the business of good governance, regionalism will continue to be a bondage.
Thank you very much, Prof. We have 4 minutes, so I'm going to take one question from this side of the hall and one question from this side of the hall. I will kindly ask for no introductions. Please just ask your question straight to the point.
Everyone, Chris from Vanguard. Right. Anyway, my question is straight to what Prof just said last. I think it just joined me now about removing the Ohaneze Ududua or AREWA sentiment into our program to, put in the true diversity. Do you think that is really workable now? That's the first thing.
Yeah, I think I'm old enough to answer. No, let's finish this one.
No, because I have to run.
Okay, sorry.
Let's take the two together.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Well, the question is to you and also to Mr. Okay. Now, in trying, everything is about changing the narrative. It probably to also bring in diversity. So if you go back to your classroom, your classes, even Mr. Obiaya, how do you now get the students to maybe do things differently, do act differently, to I cannot be free, to express themselves freely? How do you go about doing it? So to actually do the change, not all about the talk.
Very quickly, I'll respond to that very quickly. So you asked the question, the first question, what's the future? It has to do simply, with all due respect, it has to do with leadership. Obasanjo decided to start wearing this and spoke to Nike. Nike decided to start dressing it. We have not yet begun to assess the impact of Obasanjo wearing a direct. All of us. But we're defining fashion in Europe. Recently, I saw some fashion presentation in Italy, and it's all anime. So this is the thing. I would not, and I say this all due respect to those who are in power. They have no excuse why they can't take us out, because they can. There was a news that was leaked about how late Awolowo's children used to go to Zeke's house. Said he sent his children to Zeke's house in the east to spend holidays, and Zeke does the same. It was leaked by one newspaper, one magazine, I forgot. The lady who ran the magazine had cancer and died. It was shocking. And yet, in the newspapers, they were at each other's throat. So this is the thing now. Atiku was the the father of Buhari. So who is fooling who? So it's very possible that when we begin to have serious, pragmatic, sincere, nationalist or patriotic leaders, we can move Nigeria forward in 6 months. Now, coming down to your question, you see, we operate in what with the curriculum. And I remember that it was my brother that said when IMF gave him a script on how to stay and repatriate himself in power, he said professors or lecturers were teaching what they are not taught to teach, what they are not paid to teach. Because we're teaching students to interrogate, to ask intelligent questions. So I tell my students, even if you have not learned anything in the university, because some of your students who graduate and they are fantastic, they'll say, I didn't teach anything. I didn't learn anything in Atlantic University. I've heard students say that. At least you've learned that you didn't learn anything. So this is the thing. So because we are paid to teach a curriculum, we have to deliver it as such. But a sharp student will read between the lines.
It's really important that I respond to Professor's example of the woman who in Lokoja removed her veil. I think it's important that we're sensitive to nuances around dressing. I don't wear hijab. But when I come to places like this, I dress a certain way. It's really good. Young northern girls do not see people who look like them in the spaces that I occupy. If I dress without my scarf and go into the spaces, I am reinforcing the messaging that people like them cannot do what I do, and that they have to fundamentally change who they are in order to be acceptable in certain spaces. Okay? So that's number one. The second thing is that I don't think hypocrisy is the word. No, it's not limited to the word. We have political leaders who come and say one thing and do another thing. I think it's a hallmark of a ruling class, right? And when we talk about the hypocritical north, I think we are reinforcing the same stereotypes that we've just been talking about, right? And lastly, it is okay for people to be sensitive to their environment. If you go into a culture and that culture says cover your head, you see it every day with the CNNs and the Al Jazeera's. When they're reporting out of the Middle East, they'll take a scarf and cover themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. Being confident in who you are includes the ability to adapt and be who you need to be wherever you are, out of respect for people's cultures. So we have to be mindful that in the process of fighting stereotypes, we don't reinforce them. On the issue of learning, at university, I learned something called critical thinking. I don't know whether it is still taught. I think it's the single most important course that can be taught in the university. Because what it does basically is it teaches people to think for themselves. The ability to look at things and be critical of it and not swallow everything, hook, line, and sinker. And unfortunately, I do have to go out of board meeting. And they kept it,